Kiplinger posted an article called The 5 Golden Rules of Retirement Planning. And I thought it was kind of interesting. I like the first one a lot. It says, figure out your L's: lifetime income, liquid savings, lowering risk, lowering taxes, and legacy. Greg, what do you think of those? It kind of does go along with what our roadmap for retirement is.
I mean, I want to hate Kiplinger, but I don't disagree. The lifetime income, I'd be worried. That's the one that my sonar goes up a little bit on, but the other ones make a lot of sense. I love lowering risk. I love lowering taxes. I love thinking about legacy. I love having some liquid cash to have some fun or for emergencies. That all makes perfect sense. Let's talk about lifetime income for a quick second. To me, are they establishing what we need to have a good time? And, are we accounting that we're going to be spending less and less in retirement as we get into the years of retirement? And does that mean we're going to oversell them some income product that they don't need? If they say that, then I hate them. If they don't, then I like them.
The number 2 on the list is use all the asset classes. So they said you got to use the market, you got to use the banks, you got to use the insurance companies. I would add in their real estate. That they didn't add that. Tim, I mean, the whole idea of diversification within your investments and where your money is pretty important, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think far too often we see people just kind of cruising into retirement like they're still in their 40s and 50s and often taking more risk than they really need. I think we've talked about that a lot on the show. Yes, having some diversity across the asset classes is important, but I think really it's dialing in that risk, which is a big part of the roadmap that we put together for folks, Randy.
Number 3 on the list is avoid plans that depend on withdrawals. Your assets should generate income. Just peeling money off the top is the way that we all think we can do it, but probably isn't the right way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, when you were a kid and you had like a piggy bank where you're like, I'm going to wait till the yield of this piggy bank can pay for that bicycle. Oh, come on. That's not how it works. Like, I don't have any problem with people spending their principal. That's the whole freaking idea. Like this whole, I can only live to my, essentially delta between what I make every year in interest and my $2 million of savings. Like that's silliness. Like there may be years you got to spend more, have a little bit more fun. You're younger, you're doing stuff. You have a big purchase. I say go for it. I don't see people running out of money in retirement in our world. And we see a lot of freaking retirees. Now, if you didn't save any money, it's a whole different deal. But for the people that saved and ran a budget and lived their life, they understand the deal and you can spend and have some fun. Spend some of your principal once in a while. I think that's the whole idea. This whole thing is predicated. A lot of Kiplinger advertisers happen to be financial planners. And guess how they get paid? A percentage of people's assets. So guess what happens if you spend your principal? They take a pay cut. So, of course, they're going to have a point in here. They did such a good job on 1 and 2, and then they completely crapped the bed with this one and said, don't spend any of your own money so that your financial advisor never takes pay cut. That's all I can read when I see this. So, to me, it depends on your income needs, what you're doing this year. You're going to spend more at the beginning of retirement. It's going to go down. Then it's going to go up with healthcare stuff. So, make sure that you are actually not foregoing your dreams and building memories based off some made up, I can only spend the interest from my CDs or my dividends. It just seems silly.
All right. Number 4 is avoid plans based on probabilities. And I've seen this. Financial advisor will put the first sheet in front of you and say, if everything is really bad, if we only get like 3% growth, this is where you are. And then he'll show you 5%. Then he'll show you 7%. Then he'll show you 10%. And your eyes get bigger as they go through. What this list is saying is forget about all that. I understand they're going to show you that, but you really should be looking at the what ifs of retirement and plan against those as opposed to thinking that you're going to get 10%. Tim, your thoughts on that one?
Well, I think I was thinking about those liquid savings because I think nobody wants to have money that's just kind of sitting on the sidelines. It's not just for painting the house or, putting in the hardscape or whatever Greg was talking about earlier, the fun stuff, right? From the estate planning and elder care side, I need some liquidity if something bad happens, right? We talked about Bruce Willis and all of a sudden now we're going to have some more expensive costs. We better have access to that money. So, I guess in terms of the probabilities and the what ifs, I always hope for the best, but that's not a plan, right? So we plan for the what ifs, and some of those what ifs, unfortunately, I'm the negative Nancy today, it feels like, but is dealing with those long-term care expenses because that's one of those biggest risks in retirement.
Randy, I think you pay for promises too. I think that's why annuities have been on such a terror run the last 5 years. It's okay to pay. Some of your investments can pay for promises. I know people are like, are you pro or against annuities? I'm like, well, I'm pro annuities if they're done right. I don't think someone should just own all annuities, but a promise that says, hey, you're going to get 5% a year. Okay, I'm okay foregoing some upside for that promise, just like a CD or bond. Okay, I'm paying for that promise. What if I say, I'm going to give you up to 10%? If the market goes up to 10, if it goes over, you only get 10, but I promise that your money will never lose money and go below zero. Some people want to pay for that promise for a portion of their money. To me, when you're avoiding what ifs, let's remove the guessing game and just pay for promises for a portion that is important to you, not necessarily your financial advisor. Pay for investments that are important to you, and it's okay to pay premiums at times for promises.
The last one on the list here is you should plan to be adjustable to your plan should be adjustable according to your changing life. And you're going to be in retirement for 25, 30 years perhaps. And great things can happen. You might find the perfect condo in the perfect place and you want to stay there for a month, or you want to stay there for 2 months and you discover this in your retirement. That's fantastic. But at the same time, health issues do play in there. Your kids, things happen, things change. Your financial plan has to be adjustable along the way so that you can handle these things.
This is the roadmaps, why it exists. And people say, well, what makes it different? Or how does this change? Most financial advisors, you get a financial plan. I'm going to use plan lightly, that has a bunch of papers that you don't understand, a bunch of graphs, a bunch of stuff. And then it goes into a closet or a drawer in your den next to Aunt Irma Jane's birthday cards, and you never see it again. Those don't work. It just has never worked. And then you have an annual review where you don't understand. You're just reviewing investments. You're just saying, all right. Yeah, this went up, this went down, some charts, blah, blah, blah. And then they talk about your grandkids. That's not how you manage retirement. That's not how you manage a plan. So for us, it's a little different. We build the roadmap to show you everything that's wrong. We implement things to fix it, but we know that life changes. So the really cool part about our plan is that every year, the income plan gets updated every year. We make sure that you reforecast based on your spending the previous year, what's going to be left in 25 years. And we never shorten the 25 years to make sure you see what's out there. Every year we update your tax plan. Why? Tax laws change. The amount you spend on your IRA changes. The market changes. It goes up and down. So we show you how to detax or convert to Roth your IRA until it's completely converted. That plan gets updated every year until everything's in a Roth or no longer taxable. That happens permanently every year. It's its own meeting in the fall, the annual review meetings in the spring. We also have our attorneys and our tax folks on call every year to be available. Sometimes, talking to your attorney, no offense, Tim, you're a lot of fun, but like most people don't want to talk to their attorney every year, but they are available. But we ensure that they're tied to the process, that they're available at no additional charge to ensure that they can be weighing in if health changes, family dynamics change, wealth changes. Those are the big three that affect your legal plan. So if any of those three happen, you need to go kick tires with your attorney again and make sure that your plan reflects where you're at in life.
Do you have that person in your life right now that can help you as your life changes and you go, what do I do now? GetYourRoadmap.com is our website. One person wrote into the Market Watch advice column and they said they just received a legal settlement for $300,000. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be that. It could be that your parents passed and you got the house and you sold it for $300,000 or whatever. And they said, here's what I'm going to do with the money. They had 5 different things. So, Tim, I'm going to throw it your way. And 2 of them are kind of similar. It says, park the money temporarily someplace where you get some interest. Don't make a rash decision. Just get the money someplace where it's going to earn some interest, and then you can make your decisions. Are you on board with that one? I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I could tell you a quick little story, Randy. I know Greg likes to tell some stories. We had a client a few years ago who got $300,000. He inherited from his parents, and he said what everybody normally says, which is like, I'm going to park it there for a little while. I'm just going to think about it. I don't want to act too quickly. And what he didn't do is, he didn't have the tax conversation. We were trying to get him in. He was kind of pushing us back, had a lot of fun things going on in retirement. And he ended up with a big tax bill that he wasn't really thinking about. And then obviously from a risk standpoint, he hadn't changed the investments. And even though his parents were in a little different risk situation than he was, we didn't have that conversation. And when the market, did its little thing and he saw the money go down, then it was time to talk, of course. Mm-hmm. So, when we sit down with folks, it's about having a plan, right? Of course, you don't want to rush it, but really the clock is ticking anytime you inherit money, whether it's from a parent or a settlement, like in this example. From the estate planning standpoint too, you got to make sure that when you inherit that money and it becomes yours, that you've incorporated it into the overall plan.
So that one of the things that they have here is consider a Roth IRA. So that's moving the money from where your parents had it over to where you have it and your name is under it. So Greg, that is an important part of this, is being patient, don't go crazy, and put the money in a place where it's going to be under your name and you can make a decision with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some tax implications. Like, let me be the tax guy here. Now,
Okay.
inheritance is one thing. So when you inherit money, let's just say it's just dollars. You're not paying taxes on that money. The estate pays before it goes, right? So like if your parents are subject to estate tax in your state in which you live in, very few states have those now, but some do. Ohio doesn't. But there are federal tax. Depending on the amount of wealth you have, there could be a state tax. In this example by Market Watch, this $300,000 was actually a legal settlement. It wasn't an inheritance. And what people don't realize is sometimes illegal settlements are taxable, sometimes they're not, and tax is ordinary income. So if it's a wrongful death, it's usually not taxable. If it's a personal injury regarding your person, it's not taxable. But for things like lost wages and punitive damages, those are taxable. So there's some considerations when you're thinking about where does this money come from and what's the tax consequence is stage one. Before we start playing with investments, let's figure out what we're dealing with and what taxes we owe. I would say punitive damages are not taxable if they're in connection with the wrongful death, just to get into the weeds. And then he talks about Roth, conversions or Roth catch-ups. This is a big amount of money. Most of the time when we're talking about Roth catch-ups, in 2025, we're talking about $7,000 or $8,000. It's not a lot. And if you're over 165,000 of modified adjusted gross income for a single person, you can't put any in. If you're over 246,000 as a couple, you can't put any into a catch-up or a Roth conversion. So Roth may not even be an option, but when we think about it, you've already paid tax on it. So like, what are you really doing? You're trying to, if you're saying, I want to put it in Roth, I'm just trying to get deferred growth. So I'm trying to avoid future capital gains on your money is really what you're getting at. You're not deferring income taxes, you're deferring capital gains. And that's why you would put it in a Roth, depending on where you're at in your life. And if you're going to spend it, you're like, hey, I'm going to spend this money. Then don't do a Roth. What are we doing here? There's not going to be enough time for it to compound. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me. So if it's inheritance, legal settlements, let's get an idea of the tax consequences first of what's coming in. Because if you're inheriting a Roth IRA, then that may be the last money you spend because it's going to grow tax-free for another at least 10 years versus a that you may have to pay taxes on over the next 10 years from mom and dad versus a legal settlement. All of these things are driven by tax first before we jump into the different investment options. So that's where I would start, Randy. Any analysis, it would be my number one, not my number two on the list of things to consider.
We're talking about getting money being handed down either by a legal settlement, selling of a house, and there's some differences there, as the guys have pointed out. Now, the next thing involving here is, okay, what are you going to do with the money first? And Tim, it says pay off your credit card bills, pay off any other high interest, and get yourself on solid footing here if that's what needed to be. And it's kind of a baby step, but it seems like a good step.
Yeah, that seems pretty logical to me. Certainly, if you have credit card debt at high rates, you want to get that off the books. So I think that's a pretty good step too. After Greg's, what are we knocking out some taxes? Now we're knocking out some debt. I don't know. Maybe I'd knock out the debt first if I was, putting them in order. But
very Dave Ramsey of you.
I know. I was thinking the same thing.
And then the last one on the list says, consider a brokerage account with a trusted financial advisor. Okay, so Greg, I'll let you go with that one. I mean, if a bunch of money comes your way, it's not a bad thing to go out and get some advice. But the question is, where are you getting that advice and what is that advice going to be?
Yeah, the operative word, trusted financial advice. Isn't it funny that you have to qualify financial advice with trusted? Shouldn't that be the smoke coming up from the building? Like, this feels strange that we're qualifying it. If you have an existing financial relationship, then that's a good place to start. If you trust them and they've done, a great job for you, then sure. But I'm going to reiterate what Tim says. A lot of people don't want to deal with these issues because they're not right in front of them, but they can become issues very quickly where the money you inherited could be in kind. A lot of times people don't realize that. It could come over in the form of existing stocks. It could come over in the form of notes, annuities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So getting your hand around the type of investments is step one. And then step two is, do those investments work with my plan? And if they do, if they do, great. If they don't, then you need to make some adjustments. And I think it's hard because here's the reality, Randy. When we're talking about big chunks of money, like 300,000, $500,000, million, your plan's different now. It is now fundamentally a new plan. If you have $500,000 and you inherit 300,000, or you get a legal settlement for 300,000, your plan's different now. So you have to build a new plan. And the person that built your original plan may not be the right person. This may be your 30s and 40s person, not your retirement person. So what we encourage everyone to do in these type of circumstances is, if, the equivalent, or, we have this thing. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's called a roadmap for retirement. And, for us, it is a perfect chance to sit there and say, all right, I'm going to break down now with my new chunk of money what my world looks like. And maybe that's going to help give me some clarity of, are there gaps? Are there areas where they need some attention that we're ignoring? And we're going to go through fees that you're paying your advisor and that you're paying for your investments. We're going to look at taxes. What's your tax ramifications on this settlement coming in or inheritance coming in? And what's the tax consequences for your IRA or your 401k? Have you paid it? Do you have a plan? Or are you just going to kick the can and wait and use Uncle Sam's plan? What about market risk? Do you have too much? Do you have too little? It's like Goldilocks analysis. Do you know what happens if the market goes down? How much do you lose? Do you need to take risk? How about income? Our income plan will break down what you spent last year, what you received, and then push it forward 25 years. What will your accounts look like 25 years from now if you do exactly the same thing you did last year? And then we have long-term care. We talked about that in our first segment, Randy, but do you have a plan for your legacy, for your legal documents? Have they been updated? When was the last time they looked at them? We have a lot of attorneys running around our offices to help us navigate these legal questions because those need answered too. They're the glue that holds the financial pieces together. When we wrap that all up with a bow, the roadmap, Randy, to us is a great way to start the exploration at no cost, at no obligation. You don't have to use this, but even if you take it and go back and tell your financial advisor, do everything they said, it would be a win for us because we're helping someone navigate retirement in a more effective way that hopefully keeps more money in your pocket.
Well, one of the things about this show we want to show is how Golden Reserve is different. And if this were to happen to you, some money came your way, you went to your financial advisor, what would be the first thing that came out of their mouth? Would it be, well, I know where to invest this money? Or would it be, what kind of money is this? What are we going to do about the taxes? That's the kind of thing that we're talking about here. And that's the difference at Golden Reserve. Give us a call. Let's sit down and have a plan for all of this. And if this is in your future, you're going to want to have the right kind of people to help you with it. GetYourRoadmap.com is our website. GetYourRoadmap.com. Last week, we had a pretty big conversation about all this business with interest rates, and they did lower the interest rate a little bit. And Greg was talking about how this does or does not affect you. And for the most part, we're all just going to live our lives and we're going to be just fine. But when you look at the whole idea of interest rates going down, one of the things that'll probably happen is they'll get people's attention if you have a higher mortgage rate. If interest rates start going down, this is what people do. They refinance when the rates go down. Well, if you retired and you have an old annuity, you can talk to Golden Reserve about refinancing that annuity because sometimes when rates are very, very low, like 2%, which is what a lot of people had, or 1% that people had 5 years ago, now they're still looking at maybe 3.5% to 4%. Is this something that some of your people are looking at?
When interest rates go up, you try to find those fixed income options that possibly can replace your fixed income that's lower, whether it be bonds, annuities, money markets, CDs. And if you have loans outstanding and you're paying some rates, it may be a time to refi. I think sometimes people get a little overboard on this stuff. I do think it's important to look at it and think through it and see when's the right time because there are fees that a lot of people don't think about when you refinance a mortgage. You should always factor in what's it cost to actually refinance it, not just the interest rates. That's usually a big miss. Because it could eat up all the potential savings. And then it's just a big hassle because you're filling out all the paperwork. You got to get another appraisal, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of times this suckers you into doing some things that you probably weren't going to do. Like I got to redo the carpet or I got to put some hardscaping out. I got to, do a bunch of stuff to make the house look nicer, put some paint on there. And that could be a good thing to upgrade your castle. But with the interest rates, they're getting a lot of press. I don't think this is one of the huge aspects that you should focus on first when it comes to your retirement, Randy. There's other places where we can do some damage, risk things like market exposure, the fees you're paying for your investments, the fees you're paying your financial advisor, what long-term care strategy you have in place. Do you have a tax strategy for your IRA? Those are meaningful things that could save you, if not tens, for some clients, hundreds of thousands of dollars of potential savings if they implement a better plan than they have now versus looking for interest rate arbitrage opportunities with your money market. I just don't think that's going to move the needle for most folks.
And Tim, I know that a lot of people who are boomers probably have a 2 or a 3 or a 4% interest rate. So they're kind of sitting pat right now and looking at maybe downsizing their home, but nobody wants to upsize their mortgage. So we're kind of caught in the middle here, aren't we, with these interest rates?
Yeah, certainly, Randy, with, interest rates, it's a big topic of conversation. It's always on the front of the newspaper. Everybody wants to talk about it. I think, from our side, yeah, certainly we're looking at ways to make sure that people have their safe money. They're they're in a good position to continue to fund their retirement. But, I look at it from the legal side, and we're always talking about other issues like what happens if you need long-term care. So I talk about not the loan, but maybe the equity. and all the equity that's exposed to the nursing home. Because if we don't have that conversation, it doesn't really matter what you're paying on a mortgage, because if you end up with a lien on your home because you or your spouse is in the nursing home, that can be really bad for the healthy spouse, or it means you're not leaving that legacy to the kids that you're looking for.
Randy, I mean, it is so overlooked that people don't realize when someone goes to the nursing home. And I think the reason it's so overlooked is because when someone goes to the nursing home, it's not like all of a sudden they show up with a moving truck and move the surviving spouse out. What ends up happening is they say, all right, we just start a ticker, and they start figuring out every dollar they pay for your spouse's care. And what makes it so confusing is nothing happens. This mysterious ticker is just counting up all the dollars. So at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, $1,000 a month, it just keeps accumulating. And then when that community spouse isn't paying attention because the institutionalized spouse in the nursing home obviously eventually does pass away, the state files a lien based on the amount spent. And that's the aha moment. That could be 5, 10 years of accumulation, and you just lost all of your equity in your home. I think that's a scary thing that most people don't realize because it's not right in your face. You're not getting a bill every year or every month that's saying, oh, by the way, this is going to go against the equity of your house. You're just assuming that the government's paying for it. You're like, hey, we're on Medicaid. It works. The system works. And they are actually keeping a tab. This is like the unwanted bar tab that you didn't know about when your buddy took your card. You weren't paying attention. Everybody at the bar were buying drinks on your tab. And next thing you know, you're like, $2,000? I had 2 beers. And not to make jest of like a very serious situation, but that is the feeling when we see kids and spouses get that lien notice and they're like, what do we do now? Now, they will never kick the community spouse out of the house. So that's one of the things that people are nervous about. The community spouse can live there. The community spouse is the spouse, not in the nursing home, the rest of their life. And what ends up happening, though, is if they go to sell the house, that's when the title company flags the lien. And they say, well, you have to settle with Uncle Sam now. And that keeps a lot of people from downsizing houses that make a lot more sense because they lose all their equity and they can't roll that into a new, smaller condo because, the government will take maybe all of the equity in that sale because of their lien. So, this is something that we focus on a lot with our roadmap, Randy. We have estate planning and elder care law attorneys that focus on this. Tim, is a partner and does a lot with Ayler Stallings Law Firm, where he shows people how to actually get the house off the table. How to actually protect the house with legal tools, not buying more insurance, not long-term care insurance that no one wants to pay for or buy. We're talking about asset protection trusts and other tools that are out there and newer ways to think about how do I protect one of my largest assets, which is my home and the equity in it, without upsetting the apple cart of me living my life. And that's something that most people don't focus on until it's too late, Randy. And that's why every roadmap we build spends a considerable amount of time just talking to attorneys and trying to make sure we take care of the legal, not just the financial mumbo jumbo when it comes to your retirement.
As the guys have pointed out here, there's a whole lot more to retirement planning than just investments. There's a whole lot more. Let's get all of it under one umbrella and help you with it. We call it our roadmap for retirement. We talk about markets. We talk about taxes, fees, long-term care, income planning, all right there. We would love to have that opportunity to talk to you about it and build one for you at no charge. Here's our website, getyourroadmap.com. Getyourroadmap.com. Well, as interest rates were going up, we did stories about billions of dollars that were going into CDs and money markets. As millions of baby boomers are retiring, we've done stories about the record number of annuities that they've been using in order to do that income that they need. Well, today in the Wall Street Journal, they're talking about the billions of dollars that are now pouring in to dividend-paying stocks. So let's talk about it, Greg. When you sit down and build a roadmap at Golden Reserve, is this a part of it? Is this a choice, or is this something that we really need to be looking at?
Well, let's shout out some stocks real quick. I think this will be fun to give it context because I think people say dividend-producing stocks. What's that mean? What do they pay? What am I getting into? Before we get into the theory of does it make sense for my portfolio and should I jump in, think about, so I looked at Simply Safe Dividend. It was a pretty cool website. They broke down some of these things. So you had it, they listed 5 stocks that have been increasing their dividends for the last 50 years, which I thought was kind of cool. Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, and Target were 4 of them. They paid anywhere between, Coca-Cola was around 3%. P&G was 2.7%, the dividends. Then they had, who's been doing it for 25 years? Exxon, Chevron, 3%. So then those are like they've been doing this for a long time and we can assume or we would think or hope that they keep doing it. is kind of, I think, the logic there. And then you have your high risers that are like, no. Are you willing to take a little bit more risk with not a dividend history, but pay more? I mean, you had companies like Enterprise Products paying 6.92%, Verizon paying 6.38%, Altricia paying 6.56%. So like those are the things that you're comparing, because you're like comparing those to CDs, annuities. Like if I'm in my mind, I want to know what is it? So at the end of the day, we get this question more than you'd expect regarding, do dividend paying stocks make sense? I don't know. And here's why I don't know, because in my mind, I don't own any, I guess personally. So I can't sit there and tell people to do it. But if you're doing a longer hold and you're like, you know what, I'm going to hold this for a minute and I'm going to, assure that my dividend is going up. Because here's what happens, Randy. You could get into a little trouble with dividend stocks. And here's how. You end up buying them because you're promised a coupon every year. They're going to say, we're going to pay 3% or 2% or whatever it is. But then the stock crashes. Now they're still paying that dividend, but now you can't sell it because you're going to have a big loss. So there are a little bit of golden handcuffs that come with some of these that you have to accept the risk for. And that could be a good thing. Maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe they are consistent. But when I see things at 2 or 3%, to me, that doesn't get me terribly excited. I think, that to me, there's other options. There's other fixed income with the interest rates that are out right now. Now that interest rates are being cut, maybe that's why people are going to dividend paying stocks. I don't know, Randy, but to me, the vehicle is never as important as the strategy. And if people say, hey, I need this much money, I need $70,000, I need $100,000 in retirement, I always want to know, how can I build that with the least amount of risk possible? That's really just our mantra, because I think that makes sense. Why would you take risk if you didn't have to? So why would I shoot the moon and try to take additional risk on things that I don't need? Why would I speed going to the grocery store when I know I can get there going 25 miles an hour? So if dividend recaps have to be a part of your piece because of X, Y, or Z, or you just like them or you inherited them, okay, let's build them into your plan. But as far as gold reserves is concerned, they're not part of how we build our portfolios necessarily. But I can understand why they have some allure because of the coupons.
Most of you have heard the story about Bruce Willis. He was diagnosed with dementia about 3 years ago, and his wife, Emma, has been caring for him ever since. Well, recently, the family came to Emma and said, we are now more concerned about you than we are concerned about him. This is just too much. So Bruce is now going to go to a memory care facility, and the family has received an awful lot of criticism about this because they say, you guys have got all the money in the world and you're going to put him into a memory care facility. I think, guys, we've talked about this in the past, but I think it's worth bringing up again. Some people might look at the cost and say, there's no way that I can do this, but putting your family through this also has a pretty high cost. Tim, can you talk to me a little bit about what you've seen and how you've helped people? I know that Greg has said many times that when people come to you, it's that crisis month where they realize, I can't do this anymore. What's my next step?
Absolutely, Randy. And I think most folks aren't like Bruce Willis. I mean, God bless Emma, because I'm unfortunately dealing with this with our family and seeing the stress that the caregiver, undertakes on a daily basis because, they have the money for help and they're still looking at having him go into a facility where the professionals are really there. And ultimately, that's just the nature of this, awful disease. For kind of normal, everyday folks, there's advanced planning. And unfortunately, a lot of times people do wait to come to us when they have a diagnosis. But as part of our roadmap, we like to get ahead of that. And we ask that question directly. If you had a long-term care need, how would you deal with it? Because there's only really 3 ways. Self-funding, Bruce Willis. There's long-term care, which, as we know, a lot of people can't afford it, gets really expensive. They have to qualify. What, Greg, 5% of the population have it, something like that, right? So for the rest of us, what's the option? And if you plan in advance, we have some awesome legal tools that can really put your spouse in a much better position so they're not going to lose it all because of a diagnosis like this. I mean, the impact on the caregiver is certainly something that can be emotional, but it can also be financial. And that's where we really help them out and we put them in a position. So if they are dealing with those diagnoses, Randy, we've already taken steps to reposition assets.
Yeah, I mean, Randy, I think it's important to shed a little light here on who we are and how we know this. I think a lot of people talk about it. A lot of financial advisors talk about it, but they don't know anything about it. Tim and I spent the better part of almost 2 decades now building an estate planning and elder care law firm. All we deal with are people's worst days of their life. That is our job. We either are planning for it proactively when they're retired, or we're getting phone calls as people go in the nursing home. We're the ones that fill out the Medicaid applications. We're the ones that fill out the VA aid and attendance. And over the years, we've had every conversation you can imagine building this law firm that's there to support people on these terrible moments. And it is emotional, right? Like, because the parent is feeling like they're abandoning their spouse that they've loved and cared for, but they have to realize that at some point you actually stop being the spouse and you become the caregiver. And whether that is the child or the spouse, it's a different dynamic of the relationship, and it becomes exhausting. And almost universally, Randy, you'll see a huge decline in health of the spouse if they're providing that care, because now they're just constantly exhausted trying to do the work of 5 or 6 people at their home. And when it's the kid does it at the expense of their family, their kids, their spouse, their quality of life. And it doesn't make you a bad person to explore the other options. Frankly, it's also for the safety of the person, right? Like, people don't realize the risk that these people that are experiencing advanced Alzheimer's dementia are at for wandering in the middle of the night, going out in town, walking into traffic, doing all kinds of crazy things that most people wouldn't imagine. But this is a lot of times a progressive step that we help people navigate and give them permission to go forward, because it's real cost. I was looking up U.S. Newsweek, and Our Parents are two great resources. The median's between $6,000 to $8,000. I thought it was interesting that the cheapest place for memory care units in the country is Hawaii at $4,000, and one of the most expensive is Vermont, right around 11 or 12. I know there's going to be people that call us and say, hey, I'm paying 12, 14, 15,000. That's completely right. I mean, there's places that go up, but these are the medians that the averages across the country when you're looking at skilled care. So when we break this down for Bruce and his family, I think even though he's a larger than life figure, I think it's very real to start thinking, all right, mom and dad, can we start having those conversations of where you want to go, what you want to do? And I think a lot of times most parents that are in that baby boomer sector will understand it, because if you do the math, people are like, I'm just gonna stay at home. Then I'm like, okay, let's do some home care analysis. And people have no idea for unskilled, what is it, $20 or $25 an hour?
Yeah, at least 25.
Yeah, so it's $25 an hour. You can start doing the math for 24-hour care. I mean, you're getting up $600-700 a day. You know, all of a sudden, I mean, Randy, you know, you're talking about $4,000 or $5,000 a week, $20,000 a month. Like, I mean, and that's for unskilled care. That's just for someone to help with the food and the bathing and just helping people get around the house and essentially just babysit. So imagine, you know, what that would be if there are actually some health issues that require attention too. So doing the math, helping people understand, there's things we can do at Aging at Home to help people get in position. But the best thing that we do as part of our roadmap is have people explore what that might look like. And we never plan for anyone to go in a nursing home. That's never the plan. It's just if. We don't plan on our house to burn down, but we all have homeowners insurance, folks. And we have to have this big grown-up conversation that if something bad does happen, what should we do, so that you're not sitting there with all the kids guessing what mom and dad would want, and then they're putting their emotions ahead of everyone else's because they're feeling guilt or remorse, versus actually what's in the best interest of the family unit, what's in the best interest of the care of mom or dad, what's in the best interest of all these folks. And a lot of people, by doing that, you're putting everyone in position with having the healthcare power of attorneys, the financial power of attorneys, the actual plan, the life plan in place to relieve a lot of stress for that surviving spouse and or for the kids that don't have to go through those really tough conversations that I'm sure, you know, Bruce and Emma are going through, and their kids now that they're under the microscope.
Well, the guilt situation there, we talk on this show about getting financial counseling, getting financial help. But if you're in this situation, I would encourage you to also get some emotional support with this too. The guilt is tough, you know, looking at your parent and knowing that they've got to go someplace because you can't take care of them anymore. I have a coworker that she just came to us within the last month. Her mom passed away, and her mom's dying wish was, please take care of dad as long as you can. Well, now it's getting to the point where they can't. His condition has gone so far now, and now they're in a crisis situation. They're in that 1 month that I was in that was the hardest month of my life, moving my mom into a care facility. And this is hard. And I think that getting the support emotionally and financially and making those decisions together is really, really an important step. If you find yourself in this situation, or you see it down the line, you've had relatives that have gone through this, grandparents that have gone through this, please give us a call. Let's talk you through this with people who've gone through it a lot. Roadmap.com is our website. GetYourRoadmap.com. All right, Tim, tax question here for you. The headline reads this: I'm 80 years old, and my RMD, my required minimum distribution, is $300,000. What the heck am I supposed to do about these taxes? So we've dealt with this before, and I think it's really important when you look at somebody and say, you got a big IRA, you got a big Okay, we need to start converting this over so you don't get yourself into tax trouble later on, but you're going to have to take the tax hit now. That is not an appealing conversation to anybody, but this is the result. Tell me why this guy is in trouble and what he could have done or what he can do in order to help himself now.
Well, this is actually a really good story. I love people like this who save their money and they're in a good position, right? Because if you're going to have problems based on the things we solve, taxes are something that we can completely control, Randy. So, I think for this gentleman, he saved his money, but he didn't really strategize ahead of time. And when we talk about taxes, at 80, having a $300,000 RMD, he's got a pretty big IRA there.
Yeah.
But that's like, planting a pretty orchard and finding out the IRS owns half the freaking apples. So we want to be in a position where he's not going to have to pay a lot of money in taxes, right? So we want to first educate him. And you guys have heard us talk about this, but we talk about the widow's penalty and the kiddo's penalty, right? And I'm not sure if this guy's married or has kids, but we want to be in a position to pay taxes at the lowest possible rates. So when it comes to planning with us at Golden Reserve, we talk about taxes even before you retire, right? Because folks that we're working with are approaching retirement or in retirement, and we want to make sure that they understand how these rules work. Because if you don't have a plan, at 73, Uncle Sam makes you start taking money out. That's not a plan. That's Uncle Sam's plan. And he's not set up to help our folks out. He's set up to help himself out. And if you don't understand how the rules work, the kiddo's penalty is the first one, Randy. It happens because a spouse dies, and now you go from paying taxes at couple rates, they get compressed in half. Now you're paying to take the same dollar out, often twice as much because you're paying as an individual. And we see that happen to widows far too often. If that's not bad enough, then Uncle Sam has that second penalty, and that's the kiddo's penalty. If I talked to you 10 years ago, your kid could have stretched out that IRA and taken it out after they retired, slowly staying in low tax brackets. They keep changing the rules. Now they have 10 years to get it done. And unfortunately, the average person who receives an inheritance is like mid to late 50s, which is often their highest earning years. And then Uncle Sam is getting paid on top of their income, right? So instead of those low retirement rates, they're paying at high tax rates. So I guess if I'm talking to this guy, we have to talk soon because the hammer already dropped on him. I wish we would have met him 10 years ago or 15 years ago if he's 80 and had these conversations. But, we don't want to let this success that he's had, all this money, turn into a tax crisis because where he is right now, the IRS, they love a guy like this because they know they're getting a lot of money.
Greg, this is a don't let this happen to you story, isn't it? I mean, we talk a lot about widows and kiddos, and some of this is while you're living, some of this is while you're not. But this is a really good example here of a guy who's living and he's really living the tax problem in his retirement.
Yeah, him and his $6 million IRA. Boo-hoo. Yeah, I mean, it's a big nut, but at the end of the day, Randy, when you start taking out over the course of retirement and you start leveraging your lower retiree tax rates for a couple, that's how you win. You do it every year. You're systematic. You don't want to wing it and take too much or too little. It's a Goldilocks approach. That's why our team of CPAs help build every tax map that we review. We go through the process. It's all important stuff that needs to happen in retirement that a lot of times gets overlooked. And then you end up at the end of retirement and you're like, oh, shoot, I've got a huge tax bill where I end up paying 40% of my $1 million IRA. So $400,000 goes to Uncle Sam versus what could have been 15% if you planned properly ahead, maybe, and now $150,000. So that's $250,000 that go to Uncle Sam because you didn't have a tax plan. I think most people would rather have that stay in their families.
Last one today, I want to talk about this person who's trying to do it himself. Somebody wrote into the Market Watch advice column with this question. He started out by saying this, and this is as far as I'm going to go with this. I spend 5 hours a day on my portfolio. Then ... Now he's asking a question. Greg, what would you say to the guy who's sitting in front of you across the desk and he says, spend 5 hours a day on my portfolio?
Are you married? Do you have anyone that loves you? Have you ever heard of pickleball? I don't know. I've got a lot of questions. I mean, sometimes these folks that, the DIYers, I always kind of think it's funny because just like someone at the blackjack table, they just always lie. I did this and I'm up 20%, but yet they talked about how the previous 3 years they're down, 14%. I know even people that listen right now are like, no, I'm up. You don't understand. I'm like, I doubt it, right? Beating the S&P consistently, very few people, if anyone, can do. And with index funds and ETFs now, there's two different schools of thought here. I'm 100% okay with you having a good time picking stocks, right? Like if that's something you actually enjoy, you like reading the Journal or the Financial Times, you want to pick some stocks, I think that's awesome. I think 5 hours a day is excessive, but I think it's still awesome. And I think you should keep doing it. I just don't think you should do it with your retirement, the bulk of your retirement savings and your life's work. I think have a professional do it that you trust, that you vetted, to put yourself in a much safer position. Um, and I also think, what happens when you're gone? What's your spouse going to do? Are they going to jump in and start trying to figure out when to sell NVIDIA? Like these are the things that I think most people don't consider. Or what if your faculties start to slip? And by the way, spoiler alert, it happens to everybody. Yes, faculties do slip, and it just becomes very, very risky where you start putting all of your eggs in this I'm going to monitor the market basket where you're out there leveraging and buying options or who knows what goofy stuff you're doing. And ask yourself an honest question. Am I doing this for me or am I doing this for my retirement? And the answer is always simple. You're doing it for you. I always ask financial advisors why they always focus on, so much investment stuff. It's because of hubris. They're bored. They want to do it for them. It's fun for them to sit there and try to beat the market with someone else's money. And it's fun for them to guess and try to manipulate and try to see where the market's going to go. It's not for you because planning for retirees by and large is pretty straightforward when it comes to the investment fees. That's why the tax, the legal, income, all those other things are much more complicated and harder to do. That's why no one does them because you actually have to do stuff. You can't just be like, licking your finger. I think Meta. This is the quarter for Meta. Yeah, I read an article in a tweet from Zuckerberg. It's like, dude, shut the front door. Like this can't be how we're dealing with your life savings. This can't be how we're planning for your retirement. We have to be more sophisticated. We have to be more robust, and we have to have a plan that addresses all pieces, not just investments. I feel bad for this person because they're probably stuck in this hole where they think that what they're doing matters. But I can give you, read a book called A Random Walk Down Wall Street. And it'll break it down. And there's other books just like it that show you that, people can't, the market's too complicated of a system to be able to time and beat consistently. And even people that are trillionaires or billionaires or whatever in Wall Street really struggle to get it right. And they've done this their whole life and they've got advanced degrees and they've got armies of people working for them. I doubt you over your coffee on your porch with, your dog Seabiscuit next to you are cracking the code. So take a deep breath. Move some of the money to a fun account. Have fun with it. I'd recommend cut down that time a little bit so you can have a little bit more fun because they probably feel a lot of pressure. Take the pressure off, make it a fun hobby again, and then get some professionals that you trust in your life that can actually manage all pieces of the pie, the taxes, the fees, the market risk, the long-term care, the income, all those things rolled into one. And, that was what makes Golden Reserve kind of like a mini family office. Our whole mission was to deal with the non-investment stuff because we thought those were the most important things that people miss. They're also they're also things that you can really accomplish. They're quantitative. You can do a tax plan and see the results and know what results you're going to get. You can build a legal plan where it's structured the way and your money's going to go where you want. Those are the things that actually influence retirees, Randy. Those are the things that change people's lives and change people's retirement. And then have someone, God forbid, encourages you to spend more money every year. That's what retirement's all about, Randy. And I think if we're building memories, we're doing our job. And if we're just focusing on dividend recaps and a bunch of pointless ledgers on pieces of paper, I think we're missing the whole point of life.
If you're spending 5 hours a day or you're spending an hour a day, a lot of time on your portfolio, that means you're probably looking mostly at investments and you're into it. Well, if you're into it, wouldn't you want to cover all the bases of your retirement? And that's what our roadmap does, not just investments. Absolutely, we're going to talk about that and market risk and all that goes along with it. But are we also talking about taxes and fees and long-term care and income and all the aspects of a retirement? Give us a call. Let's talk about those aspects for you.